if there's a problem with wheat, there's a problem with most other grains because they have a shared genetics. For instance, there's a protein in modern wheat that's very destructive to the human gastrointestinal tract. It's a very potent bowel toxin. It causes inflammation of the intestinal wall. It's called wheat germ agglutinin. And it's called agglutinin, not gluten, but agglutinin, because when it contacts blood, it causes clotting, agglutination. So this very powerful bowel toxin, wheat germ agglutinin, which has been enriched in modern wheat, by the way, is also in rice, where it's called wheat germ agglutinin, because it's exactly the same. But in other words, there's shared characteristics. Now, I will tell you, wheat is the worst, especially what we regard as modern wheat, because modern wheat was created essentially in a laboratory. It's not the 4.5, 5 foot, 2 meter tall plant. It's a very short, stocky grass plant with a very thick stalk, very large seeds, very large seed head, invented in the 1960s and 70s east of Mexico City. And this was not because agribusiness wanted to screw with us. It was because there were a group of scientists and government scientists who wanted to help fix starvation in the world. So they tried to develop new strains of wheat and soy and corn to increase yield per acre. And they succeeded with all those things, but especially wheat. And yield per acre on farms went up as much as 4 to 8-fold, which is huge for a farmer. They didn't recognize, though, that all the genetic manipulations they made to introduce those changes also dramatically amplified a lot of the adverse effects on humans, like that wheat germ agglutinin. The reason why modern wheat has much higher levels of wheat germ agglutinin is because farmers and agricultural scientists love wheat germ agglutinin because it's a pest killer. It kills insects and molds, so they love it, not recognizing it's a very potent bowel toxin. Bread wheat have higher levels of something called phytates. Phytates also are pest resistant, but when humans consume those phytates, they bind all minerals: calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, and you poop it out. In other words, we're told you must have whole grains for nutrition. Actually, the opposite is true. Your nutritional status improves when you remove wheat, grains, and thereby phytates. That some of the worst iron deficiency anemia I've ever seen is from phytates. This applies more to women than men for unclear reasons, but I've seen women many times, for instance, who had anemia, iron deficiency anemia, unresponsive to iron supplements, unresponsive to iron medications, unresponsive to injectable iron. And these people had to get blood transfusions because their hemoglobins were so low, they're cold, they're breathless and tired all the time, and getting bone marrow biopsies. And this goes on for years. They stop eating wheat, their hemoglobin's normal within 2 weeks. That's how profound the effect can be. But that and some other aspect. Another thing to know, for your listeners to know, is this thing called wheat. There's a protein. People say gluten, but a better, more precise term is gliadin. Gliadin is a component of gluten. One of the reasons why we have trouble with consuming wheat and grains is humans are not supposed to eat wheat and grains. They're seeds of grasses. Now, ruminants like goats and cows and deer, they can eat those things, but we can't. If you eat an egg or steak or some other protein, your body digests it and breaks that protein down into single amino acids that become your skin, hair, and muscle and brain. When you eat the gliadin protein of wheat, you can't break it down to amino acids. You break it down to fragments or peptides that are typically 4 or 5 amino acids long. And these peptides, small enough to cross into the brain, and this is from the National Institutes of Health, this is not my speculation, these peptide fragments get into the brain and bind to the opiate receptors, where they amplify appetite. So gliadin-derived opioid peptides are very potent appetite stimulants. So big food loves wheat because it allows them to increase your consumption, thereby your spending. And I think that's why in the 1980s, by the mid-1980s, when this new form of wheat, it's called high-yield semi-dwarf wheat, made it to store shelves, it became an ingredient in almost all processed foods. Because I believe, I can't prove, I believe that the food industry recognized they had a very potent appetite stimulant on their hands. And you'll see this happen to people. People who consume wheat, their calorie intake typically goes up 400 calories, 800 calories per day. It's not uncommon for someone to take in 1,500 more calories per day because of gliadin-derived opioid peptides. The good thing about that is when you stop that flow of opioid peptides, your appetite dramatically shrinks. You've seen this. People who eat a big bowl of pasta, they're filled. Oh, they're so filled, they're bursting, but they're still hungry. That's unnatural. That's the gliadin-derived opioid peptide effect. The worst you've ever seen are people who have bulimia or binge eating disorder, people who will eat and then purge by throwing up in the bathroom. So these people have 24-hour-a-day food obsessions. I've seen those situations reverse completely, time after time, with eliminating the gliadin-derived opioid peptides. And so you can see a lot of this battle is everyday people versus the misinformation of industry. There is a withdrawal process. There's typically 3 to 5 days of nausea, headache, depression, which I believe there's evidence to show it's an opioid withdrawal syndrome. It's a soft opioid withdrawal syndrome. Everybody survives. No one's not survived. And then you feel miraculously freed of appetite. Most of us, maybe you have breakfast at 7 a.m., maybe 3 eggs and some sausage, something like that. You probably won't be hungry till 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. This idea, you can identify a wheat-consuming person because they had oatmeal at 7 a.m., they're hungry at 8:30, they have a snack, they're hungry at 10, they're counting minutes to lunch, they have their lunch, they're hungry at 2. That's not natural. That's absolutely not. It's more natural to eat and be satisfied for an extended period. So most of us eat once or twice per day. And so there's no need to count calories. We don't limit fat just by removing this appetite stimulant that was created essentially by agribusiness.